Hi, boys and girls. It is Mrs. Uvik, and today we are going to work on comparing fairy tales. Um, for this week's lesson, I'm first going to read you the book Cinderella. Then I'm going to read you the book Prince Cinders. Both of these books are fairy tales. Both of them are similar. They have things that are the same and things that are different. So what I want you to do right now is to listen to these two stories, and I will come back and we will compare and contrast these two stories. Have fun. Enjoy the stories. Cinderella, written by Michelle DeFresney, illustrated by Anne Carinacci. Once upon a time, there was a beautiful girl whose mother died when she was very young. After a time, her father married a widow with 2 daughters. The young girl's new stepmother gave her own daughters new clothes, good food, and soft beds. But she gave her stepdaughter only hand-me-down dresses, leftover scraps to eat, and a hard cot to sleep on. The poor young girl had to work all day, and only when evening came was she allowed to sit for a while by the fire near the cinders. That is how she got her nickname, for everyone called her Cinderella. One day, the 2 stepsisters came home with beautiful new dresses. There was to be a ball at the palace, and everyone was invited. "We are so excited! Tonight we will dance with the prince," exclaimed the sisters. "He is so very handsome." Cinderella wished she could go to the ball too, but she did not even dare to ask. She knew that her stepsisters and stepmother would just laugh at her. Cinderella helped her stepsisters dress in their new gowns and watched sadly as they rode off in a carriage to the ball. Just after the carriage disappeared down the road, there was a burst of light and a fairy appeared. "I am your fairy godmother," said the fairy. "The wind blew your wishes to me. I know you want to go to the ball, and so you shall." "How can I?" Cinderella replied. "I am dressed in rags. The guards will turn me away." The fairy smiled. She waved her magic wand, and suddenly Cinderella was wearing a beautiful dress with tiny glass slippers. "Now we must find you a coach and some horses to pull it. Run to the garden and fetch me a pumpkin," her fairy godmother said. Cinderella rushed to the garden and returned with a fine pumpkin. "Perfect!" exclaimed the fairy. With the wave of her magic wand, she turned the pumpkin into a splendid coach. 6 little white mice and 1 rat scampered by. The fairy waved her wand. The mice became 6 white horses, and the rat turned into a coachman. As Cinderella prepared to ride off in her coach, her fairy godmother told her, "The prince will be enchanted by your loveliness, but you must leave the ball before the last stroke of midnight, for that is when the spell will be broken. Your coach will turn back into a pumpkin, the horses will become mice again, and the coachman will turn back into a rat. You will again be dressed in rags." Cinderella promised to leave the ball before midnight, and off she went in her pumpkin coach to the ball. A hush fell over the ballroom as Cinderella entered. Everyone stopped to admire her beauty and grace. "Who can that be?" people asked each other. Even Cinderella's 2 stepsisters wondered who the lovely newcomer was. They did not guess the beautiful girl was really Cinderella. The prince looked at Cinderella and was overwhelmed by her beauty. Walking over to her, he bowed deeply and asked her to dance. For the rest of the evening, he danced only with Cinderella. "You are enchanting," he told her. Then Cinderella heard the clock strike the first stroke of midnight. Without a word of goodbye to the prince, she turned and ran out of the ballroom and down the steps towards her coach. The prince followed, but he could not catch her. As Cinderella ran, she lost one of her tiny glass slippers. The prince found her slipper and put it in his pocket. When he got to the gate and asked the guards, "Did you see a beautiful girl run by? Where did she go?" The guards told the prince they had only seen a servant girl dressed in rags. The next day, the prince announced, "I will marry the girl whose foot fits in this glass slipper." He sent one of his guards to ask all of the ladies in the land to try on the slipper. When the guard arrived at the home of Cinderella, her two stepsisters tried on the slipper, but their feet were much too large for the dainty slipper. "May I try on the slipper?" asked Cinderella. Cinderella sat down, and the guard placed the slipper on her foot. It went on very easily, fitting Cinderella's foot perfectly. Her stepsisters were astonished. "But she wasn't at the ball," they cried. Suddenly, Cinderella's fairy godmother appeared. She waved her wand, and Cinderella's rags turned into a beautiful dress. The stepsisters realized that Cinderella was the beautiful lady they had seen at the ball. They threw themselves at her feet and begged her pardon for how badly they had treated her. Cinderella married the prince and went to live with him at the palace. She did not forget her stepsisters. Because she was both beautiful and kind, she asked her two stepsisters to move into the palace as well. Soon the stepsisters married two handsome lords, and everyone lived happily ever after. Prince Cinders by Babette Cole. Prince Cinders was not much of a prince. He was small, spotty, scruffy, and skinny. He had 3 big, hairy brothers who were always teasing him about his looks. They spent their time going to the palace disco with their princess girlfriends. They made poor Prince Cinders stay behind and clean up after them. When his work was done, he would sit by the fire and wish he was big and hairy like his brothers. One Saturday night, when he was washing the socks, a dirty fairy fell down the chimney. "All your wishes shall be granted," cried the fairy. "Ziz, ziz, boom, tick-tack-ta, the empty chair shall be a car. Biff, bang, bong, bo, 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 to the disco you will go." "That can't be right," said the fairy. "Toe of rat and eye of newt, your rags will turn into a suit." "Drat," thought the fairy. "I didn't mean a swimsuit." "Your greatest wish I'll grant to you. You shall be big and hairy too." Prince Cinders got big and hairy all right. "Rats," said the fairy. "Wrong again, but I'm sure it all wears off at midnight." Prince Cinders didn't know he was a big hairy monkey, because that's the kind of spell it was. He thought he looked pretty good. So off he went to the disco, but the car was too small to drive, but he made the best of it. But when he arrived at the Rockin' Royal Bash, he was too big to fit through the door. He decided to take the bus home. A pretty princess was waiting at the stop. "When's the next bus?" he grunted. Luckily, midnight struck, and Prince Cinders changed back into himself. The princess thought he had saved her by frightening away the big hairy monkey. "Wait!" she shouted, but Prince Cinders was too shy. He even lost his trousers in the rush. The princess was none other than the rich and beautiful Princess Lovelypenny. She put out a proclamation to find the owner of the trousers. The Princess Lovelypenny decrees that she will marry whoever fits the trousers lost by the prince who saved her from being eaten by the big hairy monkey. Fitting sessions begin today. Every prince for miles around tried to force the trousers on, but the trousers refused to fit any of them. Of course, Prince Cinder's brothers all fought to get into the trousers at once. "Let him try," commanded the princess, pointing at Cinders. "They won't fit that little squirt," sneered his brothers. But they did. Princess Lovelypenny proposed immediately. So Prince Cinders married Princess Lovelypenny and lived in luxury, happily ever after. And Princess Lovelypenny had a word with the fairy about his big hairy brothers, whom she turned into house fairies, and they flitted around the palace doing the housework forever and ever.